You're listening to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
Welcome to Pitch Talks, brought to you by Mitch and Sam, the sports career podcast focused on your journey into sport. Each of our guests have had some unique experiences working in sport, and we are lucky enough to hear their compelling stories and share with you their career advice to help you build on your future. Today, we are joined by Anne-Marie Batson, a multi-platform broadcaster with several years' experience, as well as working as a reporter for the Premier League Productions, talkSPORT, LTA, BBC Radio 5 Live, Wimbledon and the British Rowing, amongst others. She's also building her own media empire, Amber Glass Presents, all of which we'll be covering today in this awesome episode.
Welcome to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
So let's get straight to it. Welcome, Anne-Marie. Thank you for joining us today. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thanks so much for the invite. I'm really pleased to be talking to you guys today.
I think the best place to begin is, as I mentioned, you've worked some really fantastic roles at some of the biggest players within broadcasting. But before we get into them, it would be great to know where it all sort of started for you. Was broadcasting something you were passionate about from an early age?
You know, that's a really, really good question, Mitch, because it's been a bit of a long road, actually, to get to where I am. And I don't even, as I say to people, I don't even think I've really scratched the surface yet of how deep I could go with it. So when I was about 11 or 12, I really wanted to be an actress, or an actor, as they say nowadays. That's all. I loved doing drama at school. I did amateur dramatics. I would tell my parents or harass them that I really wanted to go to stage school. My dad said no repeatedly. And then it was actually when I was at school, I started to do media studies at school. I did it as a GCSE and really loved it. And in fact, did better at that than I did at drama. And I thought, well, you know, maybe there's some legs to this. And also at the time, would have been 16 then. You know, at that time, as a black, young, female teenager, there wasn't a lot of representation of me on the TV and radio. And I did wonder if I'd get the opportunities. So I thought, well, it turns out that I loved media anyway. So I went to study it at college, at sixth form. I also did it at university. And then after leaving university, I worked for a TV production company for a few years, thought I wanted to be a presenter. And I did a show reel and I did the rounds of the auditions and so on and so forth. Worked as a researcher, as a production coordinator. And then due to various reasons, I fell out of love with the industry. I think it just really got to me, the ruthlessness of it, the political side of it, and the lack of money. And I just got really fed up. So I decided that was it. I wanted to go and get a sensible job. I wanted to save some money. I wanted to buy a house, all those kinds of things. So I applied for a 9-to-5 job, and it was for a railway company, which I'm sure we'll talk about in a bit, to work as a communications manager. Now, but in between me deciding that I had enough of the TV industry and going to work in the communications industry, I had to do various other jobs to keep money coming in and paying the bills. I worked as a disco DJ for kids' parties. I worked as a youth worker. I went to work for a community record label for a period of time. And it was actually at that record label that I worked for that started to sow the seeds about working for myself. And I got the opportunity to do courses for young people who had been excluded from school. And it was an opportunity for me to teach TV production skills, but under the guise of literacy and how to work with adults. So I did that for a couple of years alongside working with the record label. But again, it was that thing of, I need to get a proper job. So that's when I ended up working for Network Rail. I went there to work in the communications department, and part of the role was teaching kids and young people about the dangers of the railway. So I did that for a couple of years. And then I moved into the press department, worked there, and then became an all-round communications manager. And it was at that time during Network Rail, it was still in my back of my mind about working for myself. That thing just never went away. And it was actually the Olympic Games of 2012 that really sparked my thinking, because even though I was working on the railway, I got to be part of the whole infrastructure of the games. You know, it was years of planning, the transportation side of things. And, you know, I didn't actually get to go to the games myself because I was working, but to be a part of that and seeing the country come together and the spirit of it And then my love of sport, I was a proper sports nut anyway, loved my football, loved my tennis, loved the athletics. And then thought after the games, well, you know what, if I don't do this now, if I don't take the leap, it's going to sit with me. And bear in mind, I've been thinking about this for about 10 years. So it was literally after the games, I'd come out of a long-term relationship, which, you know, for various reasons didn't work. And I thought, right, this is it. Maybe this is the sign now. I'm on my own. I've got my house. I've got the car. I've got some savings. Let's go for it. And it started from there, from about 2012.
So just slightly coming back before we speak about working for yourself, for those who are perhaps looking to kickstart a career into sport, how important is it to take on all these different positions in different industries to learn and hone in on all your skills and your craft before, going for the dream role, let's say?
Oh, absolutely. Let me tell you something. So, I mean, I skipped out lots of my life story because there is so much to it, but I see it very much as a jigsaw puzzle that has come together. After I did my GCSEs, I went to college, did my A-levels, thought I was going to get really, really good grades at my A-levels, and I didn't fail them, but I didn't get the grades that I wanted. And by that time, I felt completely burnt out. And I had a place at university straight after college. I went home to my parents and had the conversation and told them basically, I'm not going to go to university for a year. I needed some time out. And my parents just went absolutely ballistic, particularly my dad, because he thought I would lose that train of being into the rhythm of education. And I said, I remember my sister was sticking up for me in the family argument. And I was saying I desperately needed a break. So I went off to secretarial college. I just wanted to do something different for a year. And it was probably one of the best decisions, and even my dad reluctantly agrees with this now. It was the best decision I made because I learned how to type. I can type 60 words per minute now, which is great when you're doing match reports that you need to deliver straight after a football match. And then I learned how to do shorthand. Again, a key skill, which I still use today. I learned how to, do word processing, audio word processing, which is great when you're transcribing quotes. But at that time, when I was 18, 19, I didn't think about it. I was training to be a secretary, even though I knew I wasn't going to be using those skills as a job. Then I went to university and I found myself using my shorthand at university, using my typing skills. And, my friends would sit there for hours typing their dissertations and I'd get mine done within a couple of hours because I could touch type so quickly. And these are skills that I use now in my world. But back then, I didn't even think about it. And also doing the job subsequently, working for Network Rail, working in communications, working as a freelancer for a period of time, working with different sets of people as well. One day I could be meeting a counsellor to argue about how some overgrown trees are into somebody's back garden, to the next day going into a kids' school and talking about the dangers of the railway, having to form different messages for different people. It's all come together in the most strangest way. And back then you wouldn't have thought it, but actually those life experiences doing those jobs has definitely fed into my career today.
You're listening to Pitch Talks, bringing you the game.
You've almost completely answered the question that I had lined up next, which is brilliant. I was basically going to ask, sort of going on to the role about Network Rail, because when I was sort of looking through your LinkedIn, it was one that sort of jumped out as sort of almost being an anomaly. To sort of not put it nicely, I don't want to put Network Rail down, but it doesn't sort of look like it fits with the rest of it. And I wanted to see if there was sort of any skills apart from what you've already mentioned that you learned during your time there that you still use to this day, and whether you'd advocate for other people that are starting out in the industry to potentially look even for roles outside of sport to try and diversify their experience.
Great question, Sam, because when I started on the sports broadcasting journey, people would look at my CV and see, I worked for a very long time for Network Rail. And they'll be like, well, how does that work then? Because I had to convince people that I could work in the industry. I think the thing that I learned very much so was about collaboration and about developing relationships with people. When I got the opportunity to work on the press desk, for example, I had to liaise with journalists on a daily basis, arrange press briefings, put together press packs, write press statements when something happened on the railway and a journalist wanted a quick answer. I then had to learn how to brief directors if they were going in front of the TV cameras, for example. That was one thing I would do on a regular basis. I would accompany a senior management person down to the local TV studio, radio studio, and I'd see that whole process, the whole editorial process as well, how that works. So I learned tons of being there. And I think that's the thing. I would argue when I'd have these discussions with people towards my end at Network Rail, when I was thinking about going to broadcast journalism, they were saying, but you've worked on the railway. I said, yeah, absolutely. But just go deeper than that. It's the transferable skills that I have developed. Don't worry about the subject matter because that will come in time. It's more about the skills that I've developed. And also I'd work with people who were sports mad anyway. You know, in the Monday morning in the canteen, people getting their teas and coffees, they'll be talking about the results of the weekend. And from a fan's perspective, you learn and listen and you know, put your point of view. This was long before social media became what it was, bear in mind. So yeah, so definitely within, you know, not just within working on the railway, but in other jobs that I've done, it's all about those transferable skills. And it's just finding someone who can see beneath all that, yeah, Anne-Marie's worked on the railway, but she's also developed this skill. She did this, she did that. And hopefully someone will take that on board and they will see that as part of your portfolio becoming a sports journalist or a broadcaster or even both.
I think that's a very good lesson to take away there, that it doesn't matter where you've got your experience from. If there's a way that you can present and showcase to, you know, the company that you wish to work for, how it can relate to them and offer them value, then all types of experience is very valid and will help you along the way, right?
Yeah, 100%. And it is that case of, I know because I get messages from students saying to me, you know, I'm still doing this job and I don't know if I can get into sports industry. And I say, enjoy this time while you can, because when you're in the sports industry, it will pretty much become your life. You will live it, you will breathe it 24 hours a day, pretty much. But remember, in those jobs you're doing now, you can use those skills and transfer them into your sports career journey for sure.
So then jumping forward to at this present time, as mentioned earlier, you're building on working, you know, your independent media label, Amber Glass Presents Limited. And you've worked with some really well-established broadcasting outfits that people will recognise: LTA, BBC Radio 5 Live, Give Me Sport, Women, as mentioned earlier. Why did you make that decision then to set up your own limited company rather than trying to work full-time for one of these companies, for instance?
It was that thinking that I had when, you know, coming out of university, you know, working for the community record label, then going to Network Rail and doing various other things. I've just always wanted to work for myself. Mum and Dad tell me constantly that I don't like being told what to do. And don't get me wrong, I can be told what to do, of course, but I am also somebody who's got creative ideas and thoughts and opinions. And it was important to me that I built something that belonged to me. Bear in mind, from the minute I left university to the day, because when I left Network Rail, I went to work for an agency for a period of time as well, did a couple of ad hoc projects here and there. I've been working for somebody for the best part of 20 years, which is, you know, an extremely long period of time. And at that point, I was just like, I'm ready to just build my own thing. I want to have my own thing. I don't like using the word hate. I would dislike going to my grave not knowing that I'd created something that just belonged to me. And I'm not looking to create a legacy or anything like that, just something that is mine. You know, and I felt that sense of pride when I bought my house, because it's you know, it still blows my mind to this day that my name is on a deed, on land registry documents. And you know what I mean? It's like, oh, this is mine. It belongs to me and it will stay belonging to me until I move on. And it's the same with the business. Yes, I did apply for jobs, Mitch. I did apply to do full-time thing, but it was just coming back to that thing of, I just want something that's mine.
Yeah.
And then realizing actually, maybe I could have gone for more full-time jobs, but it was just that thinking of, yeah, I just want something that belongs to me. But I knew doing that, it was going to be a longer road to achieve what I wanted to achieve.
One thing I wanted to touch on was your voluntary work that you've done for Kick It Out, and started with the hospital radio, Luton and Dunstable Hospital. So you're not actually the first guest we've had on that has had work experience doing hospital radio. We actually interviewed Derek Ray a few weeks back, who said he first started on the radio doing hospital radio. So obviously we've heard his take on it. I wanted to hear what your take was on it, and whether you'd advocate again for sort of people, where possible, using hospital radio as a sort of foot in the door.
It's a great way to get a foot in the door, but I wonder if it's relevant now because of the advent of social media, Sam. I mean, again, we didn't really have social media when I was starting out. It was just, a distant dream. Whereas now, you're surrounded by it. So at that time, it was an opportunity. I was at university in Bedfordshire, and a friend of mine from uni was doing work experience there. And she said, why don't you come along, have a go? And I loved it. And it was great. It was my first time in a radio studio, having to work with, collaborate with people, going out into the wards, getting the requests, and then producing a show, learning how to produce a show as well. I'm just wondering if it's as I said, if it's as relevant today. Is it something that can still, and obviously with the pandemic, that is completely out of the question now, to be honest with you.
Yeah.
And like I said, we didn't have social media back then. You weren't able to broadcast your own things, create your own stuff like you can do now. So yes, it was a great footing in the door for me. I also did work experience for the Voice newspaper. I did a lot of work experience. Actually, I didn't walk into a freelance job straight away. I had to build up my portfolio first. And that meant working evenings and weekends and using my annual leave while I was still working full time as well. I think it's different though now, Sam, to be honest with you. I don't know if, given what is going on in the world, if it's still a possibility to still even do hospital radio. But with the advent, like I said, of social media, you can create your own thing anyway.
I must personally admit, until we actually spoke to Derek, I didn't even realise that hospital radio was a thing. Because I've grown up in a time that it's not really been a thing. Certainly with the advent of heart radio stations and capital radio stations, there are now more options for listening to the radio outside of the BBC.
That is true. And it was, for people starting out their media career, it was advised, try and get experience at a hospital radio because it was voluntary, it's unpaid. But it's a good opportunity to find out if it's something you like doing. And I loved doing hospital radio, really, really enjoyed it. And it was the first time I got to use a desk and learn how to use a desk. So when I was at ABN Radio for a period of time, I knew how to operate a radio desk. So, but again, that was a long time ago. Maybe I think radio desks are probably more advanced than what they are now. But it gave me a good grounding about how to work in a studio and how to produce a radio show as well.
So looking back over your career so far, what would you say has been the greatest moments that you've witnessed or achieved to date?
Oh, that's a tough question because as I said at the beginning, I don't even think I've really scratched the surface. But if you were to push me, Mitch, I'd probably say there's 2 or 3. One of them is definitely being at Wimbledon in 2019. I never thought in a million years that I'd get the opportunity to work at Wimbledon, and it still brings a smile to my face to this day. That was definitely something that was on my bucket list, and I've achieved that. Sadly, we couldn't have it in 2020, but I'm working as hard as I possibly can to make sure that I can be there for this year, which would be amazing. Yeah. And the second one I would say is interviewing Phil Neville in the tunnel after an England game for talkSPORT, live on the radio. As daunting as it was a great experience for me.
You're listening to Pitch Talks.
We've discussed your current broadcasting and production positions, running your own independent media company, and just naming some of those incredible moments and experiences during your career. But now I'd like to move on to a couple of things which I know you're passionate about both personally and professionally, and that's sports equality and anti-racism. Much of the work that you've been doing is around the women's game, and I'd really like to hear your perspective on the women's game and how it's grown and developed over time. As from the outside looking in as fans, it's certainly getting a lot more coverage. It's more accessible to watch, the venues that they were playing at before COVID, and like I said, it's on the most popular channels now across Sky, BT. So from the inside, what's your view?
I love women's football. I mean, I'm a sports fan anyway, so I pretty much love most sports, but I love women's football. I love the camaraderie. I love the fact that they want to push the game to make it even better than what it is. And I love the fact that people are getting on board. Even my own dad got into the Women's World Cup. He was asking me about all kinds of players that were watching. It's a long journey though for women's football, and it hasn't really reached the heights that I think it can go to. But people are starting to enjoy it, and if you don't like watching it, then don't watch it. It's quite simple, to be honest with you. But for me, being able to host a radio show from a ground that has 4,000 fans watching Chelsea and Arsenal take on each other in a derby is always good fun. The fans are just loving it as well. And I appreciate the fact that they're in men's football, you get crowds of 6,000, 8,000 in the low leagues, and I totally get that. But it's something special with women's football, because I think the messages that it gives out about empowerment, about opportunity, about equality as well. And they are 50 years behind men's football, and I think that has finally been acknowledged. But it can go as high as it wants to, and I think it will continue to grow. I think obviously with coronavirus, it's had a massive impact, and it's also asked uncomfortable questions at times when certain games and leagues have been postponed, but they haven't been in the men's. But already last week or so, we've had suspensions of leagues, Women's FA Cup, COVID cases, Dubai Gate. I'm just waiting for VAR to come into the women's game, because I think that will really, when that happens, we've had it at Women's World Cups, of course, but when it comes into the domestic leagues, that's going to be quite interesting if and when it happens. The sky's the limit for women's football, and it's not going anywhere.
Absolutely. And it has been really great to watch. And as you said earlier about the World Cup, I think that's definitely the first time that I've, really engaged with the women's football. And I thought it was a spectacular tournament, and I just thought there were some fantastic games on show. And yeah, as you said, let's just hope it can go from strength to strength. So secondly then, anti-racism. There's obviously been a lot of media coverage within both men and the women's game, quite rightly so. And I saw you mention something about the importance of having your own platform and how it's benefited you being able to speak out about the important issues. How has your platform helped you and enabled you to be able to get your opinion across?
I can talk from experience. That's how I've used my platform, not from my own personal experience, but my family experience. My uncle, Brendan Batson, played professional football. He was one of the 3 degrees that played for West Brom in the late 70s, early 80s, with the late Cyril Regis and the late Laurie Cunningham. He would talk about what it was like to play at a time when immigration was at the top of the agenda pretty much on a daily basis. And even my own parents would experience it. You'd hear it on the radio, you'd see it on the TV with certain sitcoms being very unkind about people that had immigrated from the Caribbean. And my uncle would talk about the minute you stepped off the coach going to an away game, there was no security around in those days like you have nowadays with barriers and what have you. You'd have the fans, home and away, just shouting the most disgusting abuse, and you get spat at as well. And then you go in the changing room, you'd hear the monkey chants already, and then you'd step out onto the pitch and you'd hear even more monkey chants when you'd go for a corner or you score a goal. So not only did your club, not particularly with West Brom because they loved the 3 degrees, but other clubs, if they didn't like you because of your skin colour, they let you know that. And then you'd walk out in daily society anyway, go down the shops, and there'd be some idiots in a car, wind down their window and shout abuse at you even then. So I can talk from experience, from family experience. And I think it's important to highlight how much the country has moved forward from the day-to-day societal kind of things, but has taken a little bit of a step back over the recent few years. If we've seen, it's not just about social media, it's a society issue, which I know Kepsky talked about, but it's true. It is true. So I use my platform to remind people how far we have come, but also the dangers that we are slowly slipping back. And with social media now adding that extra layer, people just need to step up their game. Mm-hmm. It's all well and good, saying, well, racism is a terrible thing. So what are you doing about it? Be an ally, for example. Speak out. Say it how it is. Show us that you give 2 hoots, actually, and be on the side of society, not just of black people, but of brown people as well. And that's how I use my platform for sure. I mean, I could rant about it for a long time. But, I was raised in a household where, I've had racist abuse at me. I've had someone shout at me in the street, did I want a banana, love? I've had dog mess sent to me in the post, all that kind of nonsense. And yet I still wake up each day believing in me and believing in this country. So it's, I talk from a personal perspective, but I also talk from a perspective of just wanting a better life for everybody, and that right for everybody to enjoy their lives and live their lives as they see fit.
Yeah, I just got one more question on this topic. The one piece that really sort of struck me was back in, I think it was June, was Michael Holding and Emily Rainford-Brent on Sky Sports Cricket. Very, very powerful, very moving piece that sort of really shook me. Because obviously I can't, begin to understand or even, appreciate what someone of color has been through. Being a white man, I've never been discriminated against because of my skin color, and so I can't, begin to understand what that must feel like. What I was going to ask is do you think the amount of work that has been done sort of getting this message out there by Sky Sports, by BT Sport, by the BBC as well, do you think that is making a difference? Do you think it is starting to reduce it, or do you think there is still so much further to go that it's just scratching the surface?
I think there's still so much further to go, and I think it has scratched the surface. I feel that there's been a little bit of tide turning, and Sam, you talk about you don't know what it's like, but you get it. That's all people ask, is that you just understand and empathize. Of course, you're not going to be that person who, because your skin is white, there is certain things that you're not going to have experience. But the fact that you understand it is enough for me. And that's me speaking from a personal perspective. Somebody else might have a completely different point of view, and that's absolutely fine. But the fact that you understand it is enough for me, Sam, because you get it. And that's all I ask personally. And I think you've seen that now over the last few months, particularly the way Michael Holding spoke. And he spoke so brilliantly about his experiences, and that he's not an idiot either. And I think that's really important as well, because I think when I say that, it's that usual thing, when there's a terrible occurrence of something and you get the usual, we need to make change, we need to do this. And then it goes quiet 2 or 3 weeks later. And for some of us within the community, we're like, oh, it's the usual same old, same old. This time, I think, as I said, I think the tide has turned more, because we're not letting up anymore. There is no excuses. The minute something happens, everyone is on it, and they'll stay on it. And I think there's the energy now to keep going with it and not allowing it to die. The murder of George Floyd, I think, was a big part of that. What we saw in this country over the summer with the Black Lives Matter marches was a big part of that. There is, I think there is so much fueling it now that to actually let it die and just wither away is unacceptable, and people are just not accepting that anymore. And I think what you've seen now with Sky Sports is doing with the partnership with Kick It Out, which I think is amazing. That's a big step. You wouldn't have had that 5 years ago, for sure. That's huge. And I truly believe you will see more and more of that. You just got to keep going, keep that energy going. And it's going to be hard. There will be times where it just feels like it's never ending, but each step forward means things are getting a little bit better, because it's unacceptable to go back to what it was, and we won't allow it to go back to what it was.
Just building quite nicely on what you've said there, I know you take part in many events to do with this. For instance, the Kick It Out Rage Your Game Media Day with Sky. Could you tell us a little bit about what these events consist of, what you do in these events?
So there's two things that I do really with Kick It Out. You have the media day, which is for young people who want to work in the media. And it was something put together between Sky and Kick It Out. It was held last year before the pandemic. And it was an opportunity to question those who work in the media about their jobs and how long it's taken to get to where they are, and develop what skills do you need to develop, and so on and so forth. There's the other side of it that as well, where it holds a day which has been at the Emirates Stadium for Kick It Out. And I've hosted that with Jules Breach, and that was a great year. It was fantastic. Jules Breach from BT Sport. And it's very much, I call it like the work version of speed dating, where you have sections of people that work in coaching and administration and media, and then you have workshop breakout areas. And young people, they sign up the day, a few days beforehand. They come down on the day, and they get to, if they want to be a coach, for example, they will meet somebody who works in coaching, speak to them for 10 minutes, and then move on to the next person who works in coaching, and then moves on to the next person, because there's a bell that rings, so you move around. And it's the same with media and administration and governance. And that's the Raise Your Game day. And that's brilliant. That's good fun. Everyone from the industry all comes together, gives up their time. It's a voluntary thing. And you get tons of young people coming down on the day, which is really great. And then you have the Raise Your Game Women's Day, which I hosted, and that's specifically for us ladies and non-binary as well. For anybody, again, who wants to work in the media industry, particularly if they want to work in women's sport. I hosted that day at Chelsea last year. That was good, again, before the pandemic. So it's, Raise Your Game started as this big event, yearly event for free for young people. And now it's split off into a media day, and now it's split off into focusing on women and non-binary as well. So yeah, it's a great organization to be part of. I actually did some work experience at Kick It Out in the early days. It was Kick Racism Out of Football back in those days. And I've stayed in touch with them ever since. And I will keep working for them probably until they lower me into the ground.
No, it's a fantastic initiative. So completely agree. So final question from us today then is, what advice could you give to someone looking to pursue a career like yours?
First thing to say, it's a marathon, not a sprint. And I've had to learn that the hard way. My career has developed in certain stages. That first stage was building up my portfolio and my skills. Because as I said to you guys at the beginning, people look at my CV and see that I worked on the railway, and I worked for a community record label, and I worked in TV, and they're like, what sport have you done? So I had to do lots and lots and lots and lots of work experience, unpaid work experience. Probably about 18 months, 2 years, I would say. Then the next stage was getting paid for that work. And then the next stage after that was to build up credibility and start approaching people. And then the stage after that is getting more work. So it's like being 4 stages for me. And as I said to you guys at the beginning, that's been going on since 2012. And I only really took the proper plunge probably about 2016. Really worked on it full time. Actually, no, tell a lie. I left Network Rail 2014. I went to work for an agency in 2016. Then I did a couple of PR jobs to keep the money coming in so I could pay my mortgage and bills and what have you. And then around about late 2016, early 2017 is when I took the plunge and went, right, I'm going to do sports broadcasting full time. And that was a bit of a mindset change of having, getting a regular paycheck every month to now having to source my own work and getting paid for that work. Do you see what I mean? So that's why I say to people, always think of it like a marathon and not a sprint. Because, there are certain stages you will need to go through to get that job that you want. So that's the first thing. The second thing is about saying please and thank you. This is a really, really small industry. People do know each other mutually, and they talk to each other as well. And if you do a really good job, you'll get recommended for jobs as well. People will put your name forward. And as part of that, it's being a nice person and saying your please and thank you. So I cannot tell you the number of people that I've worked with who've forgotten those 2 things. And then when jobs come up, I think, actually, I'm not sure if I'm going to recommend that person. So just be wary of that, because we all do talk to each other, as I've said. And it also helps you build your brand as well. Oh, Anne-Marie, she's really cool. Anne-Marie really is really good. She comes back to me quickly on emails. She puts forward ideas. She's a really reliable, solid, dependable. That's really important in this industry as well. So I'd say that's the second thing. The third thing is what we talked about before, about don't dismiss not having a sports job, not thinking that you can't use that to your advantage because you're developing skills to work in the sports industry. And that's where you have to keep remembering in your mind. You may not necessarily be working for a sports company, but it's the skills that people are looking at, the transferable skills that people will look at for sure when you're applying for jobs. The fourth thing is networking. And I know it's incredibly hard now because of the pandemic. Before the pandemic, there used to be networking events, which were great. I still have to network myself. Not everybody knows who I am. I'm still having to approach people for jobs. I'm just having to think in a bit of a more creative way of doing that, particularly because of COVID-19. And LinkedIn is a massive help for that, for sure. So continue doing that. And another way is to put out your own content, which is what you guys are doing, and make sure you promote it to the hilt so people will see you as well, because that's a good way to network so people can see your work. So I would say they are the 4 things for sure. And actually, no, number 5, I would say, if this is your calling, nothing will derail you from that. Nothing, absolutely. If you love your sport, you've got to breathe it, soak it in, be a walking encyclopedia of sport. And if that means when we're allowed to go back to pubs and things like that on a Friday night, and there's a Premier League football match on a Friday night, you're going to have to make a choice. Going to the pub or actually staying in at home or wherever you live to watch a football match, so you can, you can see who's playing who, the tactics that's employed, all those kinds of things, because that's all knowledge. That's all knowledge. Does that make sense? I mean, even for me, I've been, I do press conferences for PLP. It's important for me to watch pretty much every single Premier League match now, because I might get that call to go and do a press conference with Roy Hodgson of Crystal Palace, for example. I need to know their matches. I need to know their style of play, who their players are, and so on and so forth. The internet can only tell me so much. What I can get, though, is watching them actually play against Newcastle, for example. So that's what I mean. You have to see it as part of your life. And if that means having to give up going out on a Friday night, I'm sorry, but so be it.
I think what you've done is actually grant permission to any sports enthusiast to say to their parents, their boyfriend, girlfriend, their partners, whatever, to say, sorry, I've actually got to watch the football now. It's for my career. I'm revising. So I think there'll be many people that will thank you for that.
I'm sure you've also given permission to insert other sport in there as well. So
then, I mean, tennis. I'm so glad we're getting to see live tennis again. I'm pretty much, watching it. I was every day this week and last week watching everything that was happening in the Middle East for qualifying for the Australian Open. But it's again watching, and just because you will get asked if you get an interview and someone will say to you, what is it about Wilfried Zaha that he brings to Crystal Palace that he couldn't do at another team, for example? And if you just say, well, he can score a goal, that's not really going to be enough. So homework, if you like, but good homework.
Anne-Marie, it's been an absolute joy and pleasure talking to you today. And we've loved hearing what you do and what you have done and what you're going on to do, and just really getting a real good insight into a day in the life of, working, we say freelance, but running your own media company. So for that, we thank you so much for taking the time to join us on Pitch Talks today.
Oh, thank you, guys. I hope that's given you a brief overview of what, I could go much, much deeper, but I'm slightly conscious of time. Otherwise, we'll be here all day. I love working for me, and that's what drives me. I just like working for me. So hopefully that will inspire your listeners in their journey.
As you said, I think we'd be quite happy to sit here for a few more hours, but I'm not sure that Spotify can allow anything more than about 3 hours. So we probably should end it there. And like I said, that concludes another episode of Pitch Talks, learning about the career of Anne-Marie of broadcasting, reporting, producing and hosting, from where the passion for sport began, creating her own independent media empire in Amber Glass Presents, to the positive steps being taken in sports equality and anti-racism, and of course, the all-important permission to watch all sport on the TV. Thank you so much for listening to Pitch Talks. Until next time, goodbye.
Thank you for listening to another episode of Bringing You the Game by Pitch Talks. For more information on our latest episodes, careers advice, or to even get involved as a guest, get in touch with the team at mitch@pitch-talks.com. That's mitch@pitch-talks.com, or send us a message on any of our social media platforms. Thanks for tuning in. Bringing you the game. All Pitch Talk content is copyright protected. Pitch Talks.